a little bit naughty. All right, my name is Scott Garibay, and we go to talk about Dungeons and Dragons, and we're going to talk about being a little bit naughty today. If you don't know, now you know. Matilda is available again. So there was like this Matilda movie with like Danny DeVito, right? And it wasn't a musical, and it wasn't great. But they just dropped an amazing version of Matilda on Netflix, and it's got a song in it, and and the song is a little bit naughty, and it's British, and it's a banger. It's a bop. You got to go. And first of all, the woman who plays Trelawney is in Harry Potter, is in Matilda. It is incredibly well cast. It has absolutely beautiful music. And what it is they took the British play and they made a movie, and it is phenomenal. Go treat yourself, watch the whole film, right? And it has this song that says, hey, sometimes you got to be a little bit naughty, right? And that's what I want to talk about today with Dungeons and Dragons and the entire tabletop role-playing game industry. All right, so get this. I love Bob World Builder's channel, and he was recently like, say, hey, everybody, I know that really I keep telling you to play all these games other than Dungeons and Dragons, but every word out of my mouth is constantly Dungeons and Dragons, and I'm so sorry, because I should be talking to you about DCC and Cairn and a bunch of other copy games that don't matter, but I just can't seem to escape talking about Dungeons and Dragons, because every time I move, they either do something awesome, or they do something that I think is terrible. A little bit naughty. Right? That last part is me saying it, right? Bob Worldbuilder cannot shut up about Dungeons & Dragons. He has to keep talking about it because Dungeons & Dragons stays in the news. How does it do it, right? It does it in 3 ways. Let's talk about those, right? 1, it actually does it in 4 ways. It does a thing. What is Dungeons & Dragons doing a thing? The D&D canon hardback. Bump, 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 bump. There is a heartbeat to our lives. It is, and for every real dungeon master, the heartbeat of your life is not the pulse made by this stupid organ, right? It is the D&D canon hardback drop, right? What is the history of Dungeons & Dragons itself? What is the new lore? What is the new adventure? My heart beats with the D&D canon hardback, right? And when it drops, every D&D commentator in the world talks about it, and guess what? Every OSR commentator in the world whines about it, right? The D&D canon hardback makes news every time. Thousands of reviews, thousands of videos, and it never stops, right? That's just one, right? Then sometimes it makes Dungeons and Dragons makes news by doing something truly epic, right? The keys from the vault, keys from the Golden Vault, right? It did Revel's End, which was a adventure, but unlike any adventure ever, it connected to a modern American blockbuster attempt, which was the movie. So Revel's End actually connected to the movie Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves. That's them doing it right. That's Dungeons and Dragons doing it right and making news, because what they're doing is literally historic, right? All right, because like what other tabletop role-playing game in the world is connecting their content to American blockbusters? I can tell you Jack all and none, right? Like, so, right. So basically, then they get in the news when they're a little bit naughty. Let me give you examples of a little bit naughty, right? The OGL Crisis, that was Dungeons and Dragons being a little bit naughty. They're like, tee-hee-hee, we're gonna change this legal document that we own, and a bunch of copy creators are gonna have a little bit of a problem copying. That's a little bit naughty. That's all it is, right? And for that, the OSR allies were like, D&D be gone. We'd like to destroy Dungeons and Dragons forever. We want to burn every book digitally, right? That was their response to D&D being a little bit naughty, right? Like the Pinkerton situation, a little bit naughty, like from everything I've heard. Tell me if I'm wrong. The Pinkertons showed up at these people's house. They got product that was dropped a month before street date. That in my humble opinion, he knew he didn't have any business having it, let alone streaming it, right? Like, and I think the problem was he knew that he absolutely knew that he was risking a lot of work that literally 100+ people have done, right? And so so that and Sending the Pinkertons was a little bit naughty, in my humble opinion. All right, so you got D&D. They do a thing. They do a great thing. They get a little bit naughty, and here's the one. They put their toe over the line. They're not afraid of being a little bit naughty, and we're going to talk at the end about why every tabletop role-playing game company should be a little bit naughty. We'll get there. Okay, be patient. All right, thank you. You guys are very patient with me. I appreciate it. I know my stuff is very hard to get through, right? Like, nobody talks about Dungeons & Dragons the way I do. Absolutely nobody on the planet, right? And you guys are incredibly patient to go on these journeys with me. All right, so get this, right? So you have this situation, right? All this is ticking off and going down, right? And this is what really, I think, is truly incredible, okay? So, and here's the last part. They get in real trouble, bad trouble, bad action, bad trouble, okay? The Hadozee situation in Spelljam. Absolute mistake, should never happen, bad trouble, right? Not being a little bit naughty, being bad trouble, bad action, bad trouble, okay? Sometimes they get it wrong, right? Now, why do they get it wrong? Well, they got a small team, and they're doing a ton of work, right? I don't think anybody there was, and I don't think even anybody's even accusing them of intending it. They put their foot in it, right? Like, they just made a mistake, but it was a bad mistake, right? But they made the news, right? And I want you to be very clear. I want it to be very clear. You should no tabletop role-playing game and company in the world should be getting in bad trouble, right? You should avoid it, right? You don't want to offend people. You don't want to say offensive things, right? But every tabletop role-playing game and company in the world should absolutely be pursuing being a little naughty, right? And this is why we're talking today, okay? Link below, all right? Character sheet on comicbook.com just talked about Werewolf the Apocalypse. They got in trouble, right? And I don't know the answer. I think this is bad trouble, right? It's a bad action, bad trouble, right? But I don't think they intended, just like Hasbro never intended to offend anybody with the Hadozee situation. It was an accident. I think it was the same here with Werewolf the Apocalypse. So Werewolf the Apocalypse, you'll see in the link below that charactersheet.com actually covered Werewolf the Apocalypse, right? And they said, listen, Werewolf the Apocalypse, just to put a picture of a Maori act, they put a picture, an illustrated image that looks like an IRL Maori activist, right? And that by copying his mocha, the symbols on his face, they're actually stealing his identity, right? Now get this, okay? Take a look on character sheet at comicbook.com. They didn't touch Werewolf the Apocalypse until they got in trouble. That's what got them on the board, right? And this is what the tabletop role-playing games companies are not understanding, right? So Bob the World Builder is like, oh, everybody, I'm going to talk about all these other games as soon as everything calms down with Dungeons & Dragons. What Bob the World Builder doesn't know is ain't nothing going to calm down on Dungeons & Dragons, right? You're going to keep seeing them in the news, right? Because if they do a thing, they get in the news. If they do a great thing, they get in the news. If they get a little bit naughty, they get in the news. And when they truly step over the line, because sometimes I think they intend to be a little bit naughty, but sometimes you step over the line, right? And you got to fix that. You got to mitigate it, right? So, ain't nothing going to calm down on D&D. And this is why Dungeons & Dragons continues to crush every tabletop role-playing game in the market, because they don't understand. They've got to get a little bit naughty, right? Werewolf the Apocalypse just got in the news, right? Because they made a mistake. They got bad trouble. Took a bad action, got bad trouble, right? But character sheet on comicbook.com actually talked about them. And when was the last time? You'll have to scroll back. I'm not sure that game has ever been mentioned, ever, on charactersheet.com. Please correct me if I'm wrong. But they certainly ain't been talking about it anytime recently, right? So that's the point, right? Is the YouTube, all the social media, YouTube and Twitter, they ain't going to talk about your game for good behavior, right? They're not. And they're not also, and no other tabletop role-playing game, are they even going to talk about your game when you put out a canon hardback? Well, first of all, do you even have canon hardbacks? Does anybody even care enough about your game to call it a canon hardback? Right? Does anybody even care? Right? Like, and that's the issue, right? So the reality is, this is the point. If these tabletop role-playing games are ever going to catch Dungeons & Dragons, they have got to start being a little bit naughty. Not bad action, bad trouble the way Werewolf Apocalypse just did. They put their toe over the line, right? But hear me out, right? So I don't know, like, so even that bad action, even that bad trouble, right? I did not know that Maori activist's name. Now I know what his mocha means. I know his name. I know who he is. I know what he stands for. You know, there's a possibility that he can come and say, hey, you guys can put my picture back in the book. I'm okaying it, right? And all you need to do is give, you know, this percent of the profits of the product to this cause. There could be a good outcome because they were moving. And that's the point, is Bob Worldbuilder and people, in my opinion, are looking at this in a very foolish manner. They're like, hey, all these tabletop role-playing games need to make sure they're not getting in trouble. I'm not sure that's the case, right? This Maori activist has an opportunity to be known outside the circles he was previously known, right? Now, Werewolf the Apocalypse has to fix this situation. They have to do real good in the IRL, but because they were moving, doing something rather than nothing, right? Even the bad action, bad trouble can have a good end, right? And the reality is these companies, these other companies, need to build a world, right, where people care when they make a misstep. Right now, these other tabletop role-playing games are not the example that Dungeons & Dragons should try to be, because these other games are getting crushed because nobody cares when they do a thing, nobody sees when they do a great thing, and nobody sees when they do anything naughty, right? And that's and all D&D and the other ones need to avoid bad action, bad trouble. But frankly, the model is not good behavior. It is being a little bit naughty. That is, and avoiding putting your foot over the line. But if you do put your foot over the line because you're actually moving, you're skiing the K-12s, then you fix it and you mitigate it, right? And we need to give forgiveness for companies that get a little bit naughty and then sometimes put their foot over the line and do a bad action or bad trouble, because it's not because they mean wrong. It's because they're moving and they're doing something. And the other companies, these other TTRPG companies, they need to catch up. And they're not going to do that with good behavior. Every single word of that is my humble opinion. Am I wrong? Maybe. I'm willing to hear you. Let me know in the comments below if you think good behavior is the path to beat Dungeons & Dragons. I'd love to hear your theory on that. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.